Well, I call this meeting to order and welcome to the June 20th 4 o'clock informational. We have a number of items on the schedule here today, and we're going to get first, we're going to start off with a report from the Land Use Committee. Councilor Selberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, we had an action-packed 30-minute meeting last week. We had to kind of fit everything in between our lengthy informational meeting and get everything in, tried to anyway, before the council meeting. Councilor Erpenbach provided background on the proposed rental registration ordinance. She discussed the previous Land Use Committee meeting where the draft proposed ordinance was first discussed and noted the collaborative work done to improve it since then. Should we discuss things? She had noted that it was a proposed ordinance developed with 3 groups in mind: landlords, tenants, and neighbors to rental properties. And we also opened it up to public input and had a pretty spirited discussion. Again, we kind of jammed everything in. It was pretty quick, but we got some good feedback from some people who had some things to say about it as well. And then a motion was approved by the committee to submit the ordinance to the council for first and second readings. And we also, on the agenda, we had a presentation for the Citizens Planning Academy plan, but again, we didn't quite get to that, so that had to be deferred to a future meeting. So, like I said, it was a quick 30 minutes, but we got some things done anyway.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions for Councilor Selberg? I would just like to commend Councilor Selberg for chairing his first Land Use Committee and do an excellent job. There were a number of things that were kind of out of the ordinary during that committee, and you handled them all very well and very professionally. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, now we are on to item number 3, City Council open discussion. Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a brief report that this past Wednesday and Thursday, the City of Sioux Falls gets to have a trustee member, and I am your representative on the Municipal League Board of Directors. And so we met this week for our weekly, our meeting, not weekly. It was a great meeting. We talked really about just different things that are going on with the legislative branch, about TIFs, what's happening with the TIF conversation and that task force. Luckily, we have Yvonne that is a member of that TIF task force, that she's our eyes and ears there. We talked about code enforcement, that there is a new tool coming out, and I'm sure they will be discussing it on the administrative side as well, that it really becomes a pool, and it's really a great thing for the smaller communities to be able to access in regards to code enforcement. We talked about a liquor task force that they're starting to do some reviewing, and then we also discussed Department of Revenue and how some of these small towns are feeling some of the same restraints that we are here in the City of Sioux Falls with sales tax revenue, and what we can do to work with the Department of Revenue and enforcing those laws that we already have on the books, as far as providing a list of any fly-by-night companies that come to town if there's a storm or this or that. And so we discussed that as well. We also discussed that the annual conference will be in Sioux Falls this year, and that is going to be held October 3rd. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to give you more information and more detailed. This is not out of the City Council budget. This is because we are a member of the Municipal League. My traveling there does come out of the Municipal League reimbursement, so I just want to make sure that that's clear as well, that this is not an expense. It comes with our membership that we have. That's it.
Thank you, Councilor Erickson. Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want a little clarification for the neighbors, my neighbors, who have been giving me a hard time over the last couple of weeks. We had an incredibly successful block party on Saturday, despite the rain. We have pictures of the grill masters with their raincoats and umbrellas as they're grilling. But my point of telling you all of this is that we also had a fire truck, the brand new engine just delivered the day before, had the fire truck and a crew of firefighters visit us, and they ate sumptuously and enjoyed spending time with our folks. And then after they left, they'd been there about an hour and a half. After they left, one of our police officers, two of the officers came in a police car, and the kids were allowed to climb all over the truck, spend time with the officers, spend time with the firefighters, learn all about those things. They even got to run the hose from the fire truck, all kinds of things. And my neighbors said it was because I greased some palms and I did all these things. But what I want you to understand is that anyone can do that. That if you're having a block party or some sort of event and you'd like to introduce children to those public safety heroes that are in our midst, that is something that our city staff are delighted to do. And all it took was a phone call, and I had to fill out a form for the firefighters because they needed to know if they could eat and if there was a restroom in case, something happened. And they had to be able to come onto the street and park in such a way that they could get out if there was an emergency. And so we also, the block party permit to block off that block of our street is also something that's done free. It takes a few days to get it done because it has to run through fire and police and engineering. But it's all things that citizens can do for themselves. And we had such a wonderful time getting to know each other. It was something that I've lived in that house 10 years, and they hadn't had one in that period of time. And so I just wanted to lift that up, that no, I didn't do anything special. Nobody helped me out, that it is something that they will do for any citizen. I did invite you and encourage you to do that. It's a wonderful experience in terms of getting to know your neighbors. And I know Councilor Staley is strongly involved with Neighborhood Watch and with the neighborhoods around her, and I just think that's one of those things that we should all be involved with, not just us as City Council, but all of us as citizens. So I just want to pass that along. And thank the police and fire, because it was amazing to have them there. They did lights and sirens and everything, so it was pretty exciting to be a kid in our neighborhood on Saturday. So thanks.
Great, thank you. Councilor Staley.
And maybe Councilor Starr is going to talk about this, but I know he was involved with the Norton Froelich area. They had a little get-together, and it's really neat to see this energy being put into the Neighborhood Watch program, because just like the mayor's talking about code enforcement, they want citizens to be the eyes and the ears for reporting problematic properties. I would take that to a different level and say, let's have the citizens be the eyes and the ears to help us report crime, and that we need all the people in our community to be watching out for one another, caring for one another, and developing a fellowship of community. So Neighborhood Watch is a really a user-friendly program. So thank you, Councilor Erpenbach.
And Councilor Starr?
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to share a little bit. Again, the Neighborhood Association actually put the picnic together for their neighbors in Lacey Park on Saturday as well, and we also avoided the rain because it was over by 5 o'clock before that cold rain and downpour hit. I just had a chance to be invited and be part of that group, and what's really neat is watching neighbors come together and get to know each other. And several times I just eavesdropped on a few conversations where people were saying, well, that's happening here, and I saw the same thing, and we talked about this, and this is a way we can fix that, and we can come together. They also had some ideas for their park that, in their neighborhood park, having restrooms. I know when Councilor Erpenbach mentioned that as part of the process. But like I told him, just bring your dinner down to the park. Everyone's within and get to know the neighbors. There's a shelter there. There's a playground equipment that we've invested in as a city to spur that, and just the community that comes together and get to know your neighbors. And don't be afraid to talk to them. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments? Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. Just wanted to just make comment that most of us had the opportunity to go through Metro 911. I know a survey was sent out. We were able to tour and were given a fantastic presentation as far as what the new policy is, the procedures, how it works, things of that nature. During our session, one of the questions that came up, and I said, I'll find out and I'll get back so everybody understands, was, and this goes into the annexation, as far as what happens with those pockets or islands or unannexed parcels that are completely surrounded by city limits, because you're really within that area. You have a Sioux Falls address, but what happens to those pockets, or apparently they're referred to as donuts as well. So I did reach out and found out that those pockets were addressed in the most recent county ambulance update, and they were made part of the Paramedics Plus County Primary Response Zone. County regulations apply to those areas, not the council contract. So any standards for those particular areas fall within the county, not to do with anything with this city. So they additionally, REMSA board does not provide any oversight of response times by Paramedics Plus that are not on city addresses. So those areas would be within the city contract, and that's how it's addressed. I have no idea what those response times are or any of those standards, but I wanted to share that because I know that was an area that came up as well as a few other things that we got to ask a lot of questions that they helped us understand how what happens when a call is reprioritized. I know that's been an area that had some maybe misunderstandings, that if a call is reprioritized and what time do they meet and who can reprioritize. And really the only people that are able to do that is has nothing to do with Paramedics Plus. It has everything to do with the police and fire on site as well as in connection with Metro. And so there's no benefit to them to be changing any of that, and it's really a flip chart, ask questions, make sure it qualifies, and move down the list before anything at all can be adjusted. And it really just goes into maybe it's a choking child and they are able to dislodge whatever is done. It may be now a priority 2, and so that time changes. And so we got to learn a lot about that as well, and listen to a couple calls, and just really ask a lot of questions. So I thank Metro 911 for allowing us to come in, and I think my colleagues too for making it a priority to being able to come. And I know others have gone in advance and serve on Metro and have already done this. So I think we've all been through the process now. So just wanted to make sure I had that clarification out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Erickson? Or I mean, Councillor Staley.
I look like her, but I'm not. Yeah, so just to piggyback on that, yes, I went through the tour with Councillor Kiley on Friday. And one of the things that I took away, and I told him I was going to remember this, and he was a witness to this, but I was impressed. You know, mutual aid agreements are very important to me, and they did tell us when they were showing us the map that they are very dependent on MedStar 1 for the mutual aid part. And I talked with a woman from Split Rock today, and she also said that ambulance company is very important to their area to servicing them. So I'm hoping, since you brought it up, Councillor Erickson, I'm hoping that we can get together with that company and sit down so that they can nail out a contract so everybody is being treated fairly, and that we have that backup really solidly in place.
Any other further comments? I would just like to say, since everyone's had the chance to tour the facilities now at Metro, since I've been on the board for Metro Management for 3+ years, you maybe have heard me talking about it, but I've always been an advocate of improving their facilities, because they do work it's a dungeon in there, and it's no natural daylight. So now that you've all had the opportunity to experience that a little bit yourself, it'd be nice, at least in the meantime, before we can do something, at least maybe appropriate for some paint and get some new colors in there and some other improvements made for them. But they are truly, truly very good at what they do, and they provide an extremely important service to our community, and I thank them for that, not only as a member of the Metro Management Board, as Councillor Urbanbach is as well too, but I thank them for their, as a city council member, for their service to the community. So, thank you. Seeing no other input, we move on to our presentations. And our first presentation is Let's Get Acquainted. So, Team Zoning, we're going to get acquainted with Shauna Goldhammer, our Zoning Enforcement Manager. So, Shauna, I'll turn it over to you.
Chair Kiley. Thank you for having me here today, City Council. I'm Shauna Goldhammer. I am your Zoning Enforcement Manager. Over at City Hall, we're located on ground floor, and that's where you'll find planning and building services. If you happen to stop by Planning and Building Services, you'll see us doing all kinds of work, issuing permits, working the service counter. We may be in the back working on plan checks or other enforcement activities. We have inspectors in Planning and Building Services, and they're out in the field, so you won't see them if you stop by ground floor of City Hall. But Planning and Building Services, our team, wants you to get to know us better. So that's why I'm here today, is to kind of explain team planning and building services, and then kind of highlight the zoning enforcement team. Let me start off by explaining our department, because you don't see zoning and planning and building services, right? So our department is head up by Director Mike Cooper. We're separated by an and. We have planning and building services. On the planning side, that's where you'll find zoning, and it's headed up by Jeff Schmidt, the Chief Planning and Zoning Official. On the and side of the building services side of the and, we have building services, which is head up by Butch Warrington, the Chief Building Services Official, and he has a bunch of inspectors under him, building, electrical, plumbing, and mechanical. He also has permit tax and various licensing responsibilities in the building services side. And we can't forget about code enforcement and property maintenance. They're also part of our department in planning and building services. Finance calls us urban management, and you can find us under urban management in your budget book. That's where you'll find us. The Planning and Building Services wants to get to know you better, and we want you to become acquainted with us. So you get to know planning pretty well. They're before you the first and third Tuesday of every month. They get to bring forward recommendations and items from the Planning Commission. Team Code Enforcement is also in front of you frequently. They've been before you with assessments and an annual report, but you don't get to hear too much from the team zoning or what our work program is in zoning. So we wanted to give you a little glimpse of team zoning, and we want to let you know too, I'm get to be the one, I volunteered, right, to be the one that kicks it off for Planning and Building Services to come before you and do presentations from other divisions as well. Later this summer, you'll hear from the electrical division. They're doing a statewide electrical code update, and so they'll be before you, and Larry Kippis, the Chief Electrical Inspector, will be doing a presentation regarding the electrical code. Later in the year, you'll hear from the building division, and they'll talk about how building services licenses contractors, and also all the good work that the permit techs do for us at the service counter and on the phone taking in inspections. And then finally, later in the year, probably late fall and maybe early winter, you'll hear from the mechanical and plumbing divisions as well, just because we want to get to know you better in planning and building services. But today, I'm here to talk about team zoning. And here we are. We're kind of looking at this picture before we got started here, and we're like, oh, there we are, team zoning. Okay, from left to right, we've got Jack Clausen, Brian Wilcox, Barb Stolenberg, Sue Ostis, and myself, Shauna Goldammer. We work in the office, issuing permits and providing information to customers, walk-ins, and on the phone. If we aren't at our desk or at the counter, we're out in the field. Between the 5 of us, we spend an FTE amount of time in the field. That works out to 2 half-days per person for the 4 zoning enforcement officers that I have on my team. Me, I get 1 half-day in the field. So that's how we handle our field work. Now, we have in the zoning program, we have specific permits that the zoning office is responsible for issuing, including fences, and I wanted to give you this beautiful fence. This is the most creative fence that we have in Sioux Falls. It's off Marion Road, and if you haven't seen it, it's definitely worth taking a look at. We don't regulate what kind of materials you use for your fence, but this was definitely picture-worthy in the fence permitting realm of things. But we also do a variety of zoning program permits, including signs, parking lots and paving, home occupations, manufactured home placements. And by the way, for manufactured home parks, we're primarily the responsible department for issuing most permits in our licensed manufactured home parks here in Sioux Falls. We also do permitted special use permits for in-home daycares. We also, those are the permits that zoning does, specifically our responsibility. We also, what we say, sign off on almost every permit. Zoning reviews for zoning code compliance, a variety of other permit types, all new homes, single family and townhouses. We take a look at and sign off on commercial building permits for retail, warehousing, and apartments. We also do a few inspections in the zoning work program. We do inspections, of course, for zoning enforcement code cases, and that's probably because enforcement is in our middle name. But we also do fence inspections, sign inspections, final inspections for commercial and multifamily development, parking lots, landscaping, planning commission requirements. We all do these in compliance, a field check for compliance to zoning regulations. We don't have inspection areas. We cover the whole city, all of us together, in those 2 half days a week. Compliance is really the name of the game. We provide also plan checks for a multitude of projects. Actually, like to think myself as a zoning compliance administrator, but if you call me Shauna, I'll come running. It's more cost effective to do a plan check and have the plans changed than have them constructed incorrectly and have to fix it in the field. So we do plan checks as part of our zoning program to make sure that plans are compliant for zoning regulations for parking and landscaping primarily. We are the customer service champions. We take a variety of calls. We take in walk-ins, we take in person, we take phone calls, we deal with a wide range of folks, from design professionals to busy everyday citizens, or as my daughter would say, people busy living life. So also in our zoning program, we do zoning board of adjustments. Now, Councilor Neitzer probably is a little bit more familiar with the board of adjustments than the rest of you, but zoning board of adjustments has powers. They have power to vary the zoning requirements under certain circumstances. They also hear appeals of someone who is allegedly making an incorrect decision. They think that the zoning official is incorrect in what they've decided or determined. They can appeal to the board and be heard by the zoning board of adjustments. Zoning touches a lot of things, and we have a lot of support and collaborative efforts in the City of Sioux Falls and other departmental programs, things like auto repair for the fire department, or when a new garbage hauler is licensed, we make sure that they park the garbage truck someplace appropriate. That would be not in a residential area. We review applications for new beer, wine, and higher spirit licenses, making sure that they're in the right zone or if a conditional use permit is required. And oh, by the way, if there's conditions put on a conditional use permit, we follow up on those too. It's really all about compliance, but enforcement is our middle name. So then we do have the actual code cases that we run through in our program as well. We get originations from city officials, we get them on the phone, we get them through what we call the CRM, or an online request for information or report of an alleged violation. We get emails, we get walk-ins, we get letters. We do about 1,100 cases annually just in the zoning division. That's opened and closed. We follow up on every call. Every report of alleged violation, we follow up. Some people might call these complaints. To us, it's just following up. And like I said, we do open and close about 1,100 cases a year, and I threw together just some numbers as of last week to let you know that so far we've opened 382 cases. We've closed 51 or 251 of those already. You can see between the invalid complaints and those that we can close with just giving them a notice, that could be a letter, could be a warning ticket, but 95% of those cases we're able to close. We've actually this year so far issued for 13 different times citations, but that's a very small number compared to what we usually of the other total amount of open and closed cases. So the type of actual violations that we have, frequently it's parking on the yard, signs, and then also land use activities, things like people operating motor vehicle repair out of their residential garage, which you can't do. So that's a glance into the team zoning world: planning and building services, planning and zoning, urban management. We're all the same thing, one big happy department. Our mission statement in zoning states it so very nicely. We provide implementation of standards for protection of property. You can find Team Zoning on ground floor of City Hall on the web, or give us a call. And that's all I have for you today. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have some for me.
Councillor Staley.
Shauna, as long as you're here, I have a question. This was brought up to me, a concern from a citizen about the big signs that you see along Minnesota Avenue. A lot of them are real estate signs. They're these big things that are weighted down sometimes by bags of sand.
Okay.
Are those in compliance? Do we allow for that kind of signage?
Yes. Generally, signs come into three categories: ones that require permits, ones that don't require permits, and ones that are simply not allowed. That particular real estate for sale, for lease type of signage is one that does not require a permit, but it is subject to a size limits.
But it can be that, because some of them are like right up to the street.
They have to be on the private property.
And is that just, so could a residential person have that kind of sign right out there as well?
Residents can also have those types of signs, but they're smaller. You know, you see for sale sign in front of a house, it's something smaller than that what is in front of a commercial property that may be on the market. They don't require permits, but they are regulated in that the size matters.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Councillor Neitzer.
I don't have a question, but I do want to say that I do know all of the faces on here well, and they're all very good people, and they wear a lot of hats, and sometimes one of them is sometimes being portrayed as a bad guy, and it's a job that I wouldn't want to do, and I really have a lot of respect for them doing their job with integrity, and sometimes, you know, maybe taking some flack for it. So I just want to thank them.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job. Any other questions or comments? Shauna, thank you very much. Great
Thank
presentation. Pleasure having you here.
All right.
Okay, that brings us to our second presentation, our May financial report by Director Turbach. So, welcome.
Good afternoon. Tracy Turbach with the Finance Office. It's a privilege today to be here sandwiched in between a presentation on zoning and a presentation on planning. So you'll start and end on a high point. Here we are. May's over already. We're halfway through June, or more than halfway through June. Well on our way to the midpoint of the year. And in a lot of ways, things haven't changed, so a lot of what you'll hear from me today, you have heard similar comments before, but I'll jump into my presentation with the May update. The latest unemployment information for Sioux Falls, or the Sioux Falls MSA, is for April of this year. The unemployment rate is 2.4%. That's exactly where it was at the end of 2016, and up just slightly from 1 year ago. That is below the state of South Dakota rate of 2.9%, and below considerably the national rate of 4.1%. So we continue to see very strong employment numbers here in the Sioux Falls area. Looking at building permits, some of those folks that are issuing all those permits, a dollar value is assigned to each one of those construction permits, and this graphic reflects the year-to-date building valuations that have been permitted. You can see for 2015, 16, and year-to-date through 2017. So far this year, through May, the building services team has issued permits valued at over $267 million. It's, again, a very strong start to the year for the first 5 months. We do know that there are some large projects that are coming as well. That $267 million is below last year's. It represents about 76% year-to-date through the end of May of where we were a year ago. So not ahead of last year, but still very, very strong construction numbers in the local construction market. Looking at our rolling 12-month growth rate on sales tax revenues, we see the softening in growth continuing. That trend is continuing. A month ago, I reported our 12-month growth rate at 1.9%. As of the end of May, it sits at 1.6%. So we've seen that decline. A year ago, it was at 4.2% growth. So over the past 12 months, although we have been growing, the rate of that growth continues to slow. And that's obviously been a point of concern for some time now, and I may be sounding a little bit like a broken record for the last number of updates for you folks. We also look at the entertainment tax revenues as a measure, maybe a little better measure of what discretionary dollars are in the local economy. See, over the last 12 months, we've seen our entertainment tax revenues grow 2.7%. A year ago, it was at 7%. So we've seen a lot of slowing in terms of the rate of growth in our entertainment tax dollars. Last month, that was at 3.9%. So we've seen a pretty sharp dip here in the last month. Prior to that, it had been holding fairly steady, right around 4% growth for about a 6-month period of time. So we are seeing some softening again in entertainment tax revenues. Looking now, just a high-level review of the general fund, revenue and expenses year-to-date. Revenues year-to-date in the general fund total about $67.4 million. That represents 43% of our budgeted revenues. That's slightly ahead of where we were last year relative to our budget. Through May, we're at 41%. So we're running a little bit ahead in revenues in terms of capturing our full budget. Last year, year-to-date, revenues were $62.6 million. And again, of course, the notable concern with revenues is our slowing growth in sales tax revenues. Expenditures year-to-date, we've expended $54.3 million of our general fund. That represents 34%, a little over 1/3 of our budget. And that's consistent. Last year, we were at 33% at this time as well. I've added one slide to give you a little more insight into our sales tax revenues and what makes up that revenue, what types of sales. No surprise, I think, is that retail sales, what the state categorizes as retail sales, makes up a little more than half of those taxable sales. And this pie chart is in your monthly report as well. It's a duplicate of what you have in the written report. And that represents the taxable sales for the first 5 months of this year, although I would venture a guess that if we looked at it at the end of the year after a full 12-month period of time, it would not look a whole lot different. I think the makeup is pretty consistent from month to month. So retail sales represent 53% of the overall taxable sales. That was actually down 1% for the first 5 months of the year, so we've seen retail sales actually decline January through May when we compare it to January through May of last year. And again, the state breaks each one of these slices of the pie down into multiple categories. So you can go crazy trying to drill down into this and really trying to analyze some of that. And I'll share just a couple things with you in a minute relative to those retail sales. The next largest category of taxable sales is services. Many of the services in the state of South Dakota are subject to sales tax. You can see it makes up 21% of the taxable sales for the first 5 months of this year. And that category actually grew about 0.5% relative to last year for that same 5-month period of time. The purple category there is the next largest, 11%. It's kind of a mixed bag of taxable sales in that it involves transportation, communication, and utility services, and a range of other types of sales. That category actually saw 2% growth during that 5-month period of time. So we're seeing retail sales that are declining, and in some other areas we're seeing some very modest increases. Looking a little closer at that retail portion, the largest piece of the pie there, during the first 5 months of the year, I mentioned that retail sales declined 1%. Within that, the state actually breaks that down further into about a half a dozen or so different categories, and then each one of those is broken down even further. But looking at that retail, the categories of building materials and general merchandise are actually up, and as you might expect, with strong construction activities taking place in the local economy, that's up modestly. And food, automotive, and apparel are down. So you can kind of draw your own conclusions about why some of those things may be declining, or sales of those things may be declining. So that's just a little bit more insight into what's going on within our local economy as it relates to our sales tax revenue. So with that, I'd entertain whatever questions you folks have this month.
Thank you, Director Turback. Any questions for the Director? Councillor Neitzer.
I don't know that it shows it in this slide. Are any of the enterprises experiencing any tightening that they've been able to see? Maybe a lot of this is stuff that's so fixed. I mean, you still got to flush your toilet, but have they experienced revenue shortfalls or anything to that extent?
The softening of our sales tax revenues is the kind of the singular concern that we have relative to revenue. So no, to answer your question, we aren't concerned with revenues in our enterprise funds. They're showing good strong revenues and positive cash flows within all 5 of our enterprise funds.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Erpenbach.
Thank you. Tracy, I appreciate the new slide. That's incredibly helpful, and I appreciate the background information that you had with it as well. I'd like to see this slide going forward as well. One of the things I was doing while you were talking was kind of looking back at household median income, and because we know that obviously part of the decline in the growth of the sales tax, part of it is the ag economy, and we know it is tanking right now, and I don't want to diminish that in any way. But I also am very aware of the impact that online shopping is having on our community and our ability to, quite honestly, fill potholes in your street. And so that was one of the things I wanted to just look at was the trend in the median household income since 2005 in Sioux Falls. The trend is pretty stable. And I realize it's a median. It's not the lowest, it's not the highest, it's the middle, but it's been pretty much the same in Sioux Falls. And our population is growing. And so I guess I don't have a question, but I do have that thought that is on all of our minds anyway, and I just want to say it out loud again, that yes, it's really convenient to have that box delivered to your house. And it's really amazing when we can keep your streets up and do the things that we need to do with sales tax dollars. So something's got to give. You're showing us down, 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 down. There's nothing going up here. Tracy, in the last year that you've been talking to us, nothing going up. I'm just frustrated and concerned. And I know that you are too. And I guess I appreciate, showing us where those taxes come from, because it does go to that idea that it's on us, folks. It's on us.
Yeah, and you've really touched on two of the things that we believe is causing that slower growth, and that's farm incomes have come a long ways down off their peak in 2011 and 2012, and that clearly is having an impact on the local economy and on our taxable sales. And secondly, the online shopping, and I mentioned that apparel was one of the categories that was down, and in looking at that, when we compare the taxable sales on apparel as reported by the state for the first 5 months of this year compared to the first 5 months of last year, sales are actually down more than 6% on apparel. And I have to believe that a lot of that is due to online shopping. I don't think people are necessarily spending less on clothes, but a lot of it is not taking place at the bricks and mortar stores in town. So I think that's my theory. I don't have a way to prove that. The other category I mentioned that is down is food sales, food stores. And again, I don't think people are eating less per se, but sales by food stores are down over 4.5%. And that's the third factor I think that we've talked about, and that's really a lack of inflation in food prices. And I think if you go to the grocery store and if you buy a dozen eggs or whatever, we're just not seeing a lot of price escalation when it comes to groceries. And I think that's while that may be a great thing as consumers, we all get more for our money when we go to the store, but it does translate into sales tax suppressing the rate of growth on our sales taxes. If we see a normal rate of inflation of 2 to 3% a year on food prices, we would expect to see 2 to 3% growth in our sales tax revenues from those sales. When that's not occurring, we don't see the growth.
Thank you.
Any other comments? And I will point out what the governor has also pointed out, that the state is affected the same way, and it's maybe even a bit more serious on their level, on the state level, than it is on the city level. And this is a regional phenomena as well as very possibly nationally. I haven't paid as much attention outside our region. Is this happening on the coast as well? Do you know? Well,
in general, the national economy is growing. It's growing at I think a frustratingly low rate overall nationally. But I think coast to coast, you'll find pockets where things are going very, very well, and pockets where things are not going nearly as well. I think we're kind of in the middle there. I think things are still growing here, and in general, our economy is doing really well. It's really the taxable sales where we're seeing that suppression. I mean, construction is strong, employment is good. Inflation is low. That should be good for the economy. So we're seeing a lot of reasons to be optimistic, but at the same time, we aren't seeing those dollars come into Sioux Falls from the outlying areas due to farm income. We're seeing a lot of sales that are escaping taxation due to online. So there are things working against us, certainly, but time will tell. I'm not in the business of prognosticating what's going to happen in the future, but that's the way I see things today.
Well,
Chairman, can I?
Yes, Councilor Starr.
Director Turbeck, when we look at, I know that some major online retailers have started collecting sales tax. Have we been able to see any of that? I know we can't talk about specific businesses, but the large ones that start with A had decided to start collecting sales tax for us as a state. Is there a way to measure that without talking about a specific business?
No, we have access to no information whatsoever as to how much any particular vendor, whether it's an online retailer or a storefront retailer, might collect in sales tax revenues. But my understanding is that the way that Amazon, for example, operates, a lot of the sales that or purchases that people make through Amazon are not necessarily from Amazon. They're actually serving as a broker, and the agreement, as I understand it, that the state has with Amazon does not necessarily apply to those other entities for which Amazon is serving as a broker. So while it may have sounded really good, like we might see a real bump, we haven't seen that, and not that we can measure anyway, but I think part of that is due to the fact that a lot of those sales that for those boxes we're seeing delivered every day in every neighborhood are still escaping taxation, whether they're through Amazon or Wayfair or Overstock.com, any of those online retailers.
Well, I think with my neighbor, I'm up to 5 or 6 days in a row now where I've seen the post office throw a box on their front steps that are part of that. But if it's from a retailer who does have a brick and mortar presence in the state, I know there's the possibility of tax being collected there versus from a company that doesn't have a presence here. So,
and there are some things happening that within the court system, that are reason. They give me reason to be at least somewhat hopeful that something might change. We don't know exactly, and it will take time for those things to wind their way through the state court system, and then hopefully, ultimately, to the U.S. Supreme Court. That could be a major game changer in terms of collecting sales taxes on those remote retailers. So,
Councillor Erickson.
This was talked about when we were at the Municipal League too, and Lieutenant Governor Matt Michaels, during his time with him, he had made reference to this lawsuit as well, and that's been going on, and it works at the speed of molasses, so we know it's a very long, tedious process. We were also informed that the legislature is also potentially looking at a fee per delivery that would potentially be split amongst the state and city, such as a sales tax almost, but it's a delivery fee. So if you choose to shop online, that's fine, but you're going to pay $5 a box. Now, I'm paraphrasing, don't quote me on that, but it's just, there would be possibly this delivery fee that then would be backfilled for the online shopping that is taking place. And I don't know if it would be in relationship to the amount spent. I think it's really more just a delivery charge that would then go back to the state. Obviously, that has to go through many hearings and has to be vetted by many people. But that was something that Yvonne brought up as well, and while we were in Pier, and so that's something to keep an eye on, as well as that people are trying to think outside the box. They are trying to figure out a way to make this work and capture those online sales that we are missing out on, and kind of go from there. Amazon was also talked about while we were there, and it is that platform that you and I can sell stuff, much like an eBay, so to speak, on there, that you can use it as a platform, and it's only those Amazon sales, which is only a small portion. So if you're buying directly from Amazon, those are the items that you will pay the sales tax on. But, and I don't know, maybe I think it's just the 4% though. Are they collecting both state and city sales tax on it? I don't know.
When the tax gets collected, yes, they are collecting the local tax.
Collecting it all,
well.
okay, because that was an area that we discussed and weren't quite sure either, so.
Yep.
But you got to wait for the lawsuit to go through and kind of see what happens, but it's, unfortunately, we're waiting and not seeing that growth until that happens.
And that is something that's a concern nationwide. There are only a handful, very small number of states that don't have a general sales tax, and so almost every state in the country is dealing with that same concern and seeing their revenues eroded because of those sales that are escaping. And they're all, almost to the state, I think they're all trying to find ways to plug that gap. And really the inaction by Congress to really address that situation has kind of put us where we are today. So I think a lot of the hopes today are pinned on some of the court actions to actually have the Supreme Court change the law of the land that we've been living with for the last 20 years, where it requiring a retailer to have a physical presence within the state in order for them to be obligated to collect those taxes. So this is something we're dealing with, certainly as we have been for over a year now, managing through that slump in growth, if you want to call it that. saving money where we can on expenditures, and it's certainly been at the forefront as we're developing the 2018 budget. We know we're going to have a much less growth to work with than what we have been accustomed to in historically for the city of Sioux Falls. So that's been a predominant factor in the 18 budget, and that's something you folks will see in the capital program next week, and then the operating budgets that will follow. So you can expect that to be a topic of discussion going forward as well.
Okay. Councilor Urbanbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't want to make it sound like I never shop online and that I'm so much better than the rest of you, because I do shop online. But the point I wanted to make, and I'm glad that the conversation went the way that it did, because we have the perspective of the state and the region and the federal government. I think the piece of it that's most important is that we, and this is what I'm trying to do for myself, is to be aware of what I'm buying, and can I get it locally rather than, or can I have it ordered online and have it delivered locally so that the taxes are collected locally. I'm trying to be more intentional about how I make my purchases, and it's partly because I'm in the middle of this with all of you that I understand the real ramifications of all of it. But I think when I say it's on us collectively, it is that piece as well. It is on us to speak to Congress. It is on us to push our representatives to say, hey, this is something that matters to us, that we do want to have that wonderful ability, that convenience of having things delivered in that way. And so I appreciate, Tracy, the ability to have the conversation, and that we are continuing in our advocacy to speak out about this, and then to be aware and to make it different and better for the future. So thank you.
I appreciate that too, because we focus a lot because it's such a key revenue source for us. Yeah. We focus on the lost sales tax revenues, but there's another important aspect to that, and that is the local businesses are losing sales because of it. And so as you know, we're to some degree we're insulated here in Sioux Falls from that because we do have such a strong economy. But even here, our local retailers are being significantly impacted by that, and you're seeing it across the country where the big box stores and a lot of the retail storefront bricks and mortar kind of businesses are going out of business because they just can't compete with online retailers. And so that's kind of another aspect of this that's really in the long term is concerning, I think, in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Councilor Staley.
A different perspective on this. Would you acknowledge that some people may be just spending less just because that's part within their budget and their personal life?
I'm sure there are some.
That could account for some of this downturn as well, that people are just a little more cautious in purchasing new things. So that kind of a thing, going forward, that will be something that's maybe a fixed situation. Would you acknowledge that?
Yeah, I don't have anything that tells me that's happening to any large degree. If things were like they were in 2008 and 2009, where you see people in large numbers begin to lose their jobs, unemployment is going up, sales across the community are dropping drastically, then certainly people react by spending less, I think, or many people do. So yeah, I mean, that's an ebb and flow. We don't really have any good indicators to tell us when times generally are good, how people are, individually, how they might be responding.
Okay, seeing no more questions. Thank you very much, Director Turback. We appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, and the final agenda item is City Planning Academy by Russ Sorensen and others. We'll introduce them as they come forward. But Russ, first off, let me thank you for your patience and for your willingness to come back this week, because we were short on time last week and you were scheduled. So thank you very much, and we apologize for the inconvenience.
No worries. We're glad to be here. Good afternoon, City Councilors and viewing citizens. Sioux Falls, my name is Russ Sorensen, Urban Planner. Along with me this afternoon, I'm proud to say I work with a great group of people. My planning colleagues, Jason Bieber, Urban Planner, Sam Trabilcock, Transportation Planner, and Jeff Schmidt, Chief Planning and Zoning Official, and of course, Shauna Goldhammer, Zoning Manager. As you may know, the City of Sioux Falls has existing citizen academies. For example, the Police Department hosts a Public Safety Citizens Academy with Sioux Falls Fire Rescue and Metro 911. Human Relations Department, they sponsor such academy programs such as Compassionate Sioux Falls and Community Connections. As part of the Planning and Building Services Department's strategic plan to further implement our public service and educational outreach and to celebrate National Planning Month this October, we would like to continue showcasing our professional department's value to the Sioux Falls citizens. We respectfully propose to establish a Citizens Planning Academy pilot program and request your support to proceed. The Citizens Planning Academy would provide another opportunity to showcase our department's efforts to implement our vision and our mission statements. It would encourage citizen participation and empowerment to achieve better understanding of community planning. The Citizens Planning Academy would also offer an educational forum in community building and also increase public awareness about National Planning Month in this October. What is the Citizens Planning Academy as we would envision it? And like I indicated my colleagues here, there's probably over close to 80 years of experience here before you this afternoon. We have some great ideas, and we have wonderful people in our community. We want to share what we know and what we don't know, and that's what the purpose of this is. The Citizens Planning Academy, a brief description would be it's an educational program. We all need to be educated. We enjoy being a part of learning. And it would be accessible to any resident who is interested in learning more about the role planning plays in building community. The goal is simple: to empower citizens to achieve a better understanding of community planning, its language, nuances, its processes, and so that they can effectively engage in planning efforts both in their neighborhoods and in our city. The Citizens Planning Academy would be an initial pilot program which would kick off during the National Planning Month this October and serve, we figure, between 20 and 25 citizens. This pilot program would be made up of 2 sessions held on Mondays, the first of the month is October 2nd, and later on in October 30th. We'd conduct them at 5:30 to 7:30 for a couple hours. And also they'd be held at the downtown library, an educational place. The program would provide an introduction to the basics of community planning in the first session on October 2nd, and in October 30th, we'd extend beyond the basics for how do we plan a planned city, and what are the growth management tools that we have available to us in our community. It's aimed at engaging and educating our citizens, our neighborhood leaders, and future members of appointed citizen boards, perhaps. This program would provide citizens and business owners with the opportunity to learn about city planning and participate in informative discussions and about how city planning helps shape our community, as well as how our city manages the long-term vision of its citizens. Land uses, subdivisions, traffic and legal matters, along with how developments are designed, they're reviewed, and how they might be approved through this body. The sessions would be led by the city's planning department staff and perhaps other city staff that we would recruit based on the interests of citizens. We certainly would be open and welcome citizen input, and that's part of this component that we'd want to champion as well. For example, the first session, we'd have an icebreaker, we'd talk about the history of planning. What is land use? What is zoning? What is the difference? What are the components and the tools for a well-planned city and the growth management? Again, what is the zoning ordinance? What is the planning, comprehensive plan? And of course, we'd certainly try to relate to other topics or address questions that the citizens might have before us. We'd also want to take a look at later on towards the end of the month, what are the planning applications for land use? We see all these different multicolored signs in our community. What does that mean in my neighborhood? Is this important to me? We'd also want to try to engage them in what is the public hearing process? When are the appropriate times to come before you? To have their strong voices as a neighborhood or as a citizen, and how that process can be more effective for everyone. Again, we would look at related topics of interest by the citizens. A pre-registration process we think would be very helpful, and it would be conducted in mid-August. There's three things that would gauge the citizen interest. We'd obtain general contact information. We'd also want to learn why the individual is interested in participating in the Citizens Planning Academy. It would also help us accommodate any space and accessibility needs that might be needed and warranted. It would assist us with meeting preparations in terms of handouts, presentations, and so forth. And it would also help us gauge as to how many attendees we'd have at a pilot program. It would help us to better engage and share and address citizen topics of interest. And on that registration form, that would be able to be completed online or a phone call or email. We'd certainly want to know what are the topics of interest by those citizens. And we'd certainly be open and welcome their input. In terms of a proposed timeline, I look at it that it includes two components, one of outreach and one of value. The outreach component would run from May to September. We've had various internal discussions within our planning office about doing this. We've also have a meeting with you today to inform you and see if to gauge the support for this type of academy program. But come mid-July to September, we would conduct news releases and do informational blitzes to the citizens, focus groups, neighborhood associations via social media, and open houses before or after planning commission meetings, as well as city council meetings. In August, we would want to meet with our planning commission and inform them as to what this is, because they deal with citizens on a monthly basis, just like you. And then, again, in mid-August, the registration would begin. The other component for our proposed timeline deals with the value. Of course, in October, we would have our Planning Academy, the first session, at the downtown library. But we'd want to come back to you with a written proclamation to kick off and recognize National Planning Month and embrace the planning that we are doing here in our community locally. And then on the second session would be the 30th of October. On the 7th of November, we would like to recognize those participants that have participated in the Citizens Planning Academy and bring them forth to a city council meeting where they can be recognized for their efforts, as well as their time commitments and their understanding a little bit better of what the process is for community building. The participants in our Sioux Falls City Planning Academy would come away not only with an understanding of how city planning helps shape our community, but would also the importance of their engagement, their participation in local affairs as community builders in the development of our community. We respectfully propose to establish a Citizens Planning Academy pilot program, and we request your endorsement to move forward. And I'm going to turn to my colleagues to see if there's anything that I have missed or that needs to be added. So that would conclude our presentation, unless there are any questions of us.
Thank you, Russ.
Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Selberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. I think it sounds like a wonderful program. Have you had a lot of public input or requests for something like this, or how did it get started?
We've looked at national trends, other communities with networking. You know, we've got well over 70, 80 years of experience, and we have networks of what's working better in your community. And they said citizen academies, getting out in front of the citizens before you have those controversial items so that they know the proper times and the channels as to where to come forth and express their views and their voices.
Okay.
And so looking at ideas of annexation, growth and development in neighborhoods and so forth, and all of the good things that make our community great, we want to make them better and allow the citizenry to have an opportunity to be engaged with us as a planning staff so that we're doing our outreach, we're completing our mission there, as well as we're engaging them and helping them through a process. You know, we help a lot of developers come through and come before you. It's time to kind of look at it, look at citizens as well, so that we can have a little more compatible understanding of the process.
Well, even as somebody who makes a living in real estate, and I am on the city council, but I see a lot here that I could probably brush up on and learn. So can we squeeze in the back of the room if there's room for us?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
It's open to anyone.
Councillor Neitzer.
Yeah, I would say from my experience, I would love it if realtors to get their license had to go through a zoning class. Yeah, anyway.
Don't look at me.
Okay. Because those questions do come up, and sometimes they don't have the answer. Or the wrong answer. No offense.
I'm going to turn my mic
I think
off.
it's a great idea. I would just throw out maybe a few suggestions. The first is, and I eat this stuff up. I love it. So, but I'm just nerdy and detail oriented. But the first thing I think is, as far as recruitment, I think the big thing would be, you've got to tell people why they should care, because in my experience, people just don't really care until it's in their backyard, until there's a Walmart proposed next to them. Getting them to come to an open house on a comprehensive plan is very difficult. So, you know, letting them know that this affects all these different portions of your property, your neighborhood, how it's developed, the fences you can do, where your driveway can be. Why should I care? So I think, you know, that's the big challenge I think that you got to work on. And then for the class, have you thought about doing some dry runs, maybe with whether it be city employees who have nothing to do with zoning, or because I think the thing is, and it's the same thing in my industry when I teach, when I have to go to a customer site and give them some sort of a class, I have to consider the audience, because I'm so immersed in the technology stuff. I can start using acronyms that just go over their head, or I can say things assuming that everybody knows what I know, but they don't, and you have to work on keeping it simple. So trying to just keep it as simple as possible, and that if you presented it to people that aren't, you know, in your world, that it makes sense to them. Yes. That it's not too complicated. And if they have questions, you can drill down. But so those are my two things: keeping it simple and getting people why they should want to take this class. Because, you know, like Citizens Police Academy, I've taken that, but, you know, with all due respect, a police academy is a little more sexy than a zoning academy. You know, and I love this stuff, but
they have bells and whistles and sirens.
Exactly. So those are my two things, I guess.
Maybe we'll have treats.
Yeah, there you go. Tell them there's free food. So thank you.
Those are great comments, and we'll certainly implement them in our further decision, provided there is support from this group.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Starr.
Thank you, Russ. I think this is a great idea again, and I echo similar to what Councillor Neitzer said, that maybe we need to spice it up a little bit. If we throw in a fire truck ride or something, like you said, as part of it, or a city tour with Jason Bieber. I've had a couple of those myself. That might be the third. I mean, it's one thing to see all of this in a classroom setting or in the library classroom setting, but something that, whether it is a tour or a bus ride or something where it's a couple hour of experience. It's been some great experiences that we've had over the course of the last year where Director Cotter can bring his bucket of gunk from the wastewater treatment center to entice us, but being out there on a hot July afternoon is totally different. So if there's some way to include something that where you can touch and feel at the same time too as well. So, and I know pictures will do a lot of that for it, but I just want to make sure that you understand our support today, or my support as well. I think this is a great idea. Anything that we do to include citizens, and the key is going to be the recruiting and getting people to have a chance to know that this exists.
We recognize that, and we want it to be more than just a classroom environment. We want it to be hands-on. And, you know, with a pre-registration, we'll know where folks are from and what neighborhoods and what part of town and so forth, and what are the issues or the concerns or the good things that they want to bring out and champion too. So maybe it is a bus tour or jump in a van and go look at that, depending on the numbers. But we're hopeful that it'll be successful. Again, it's a pilot project at this time.
Councillor Staley?
Russ, let me say I've known you for several years, and first of all, you have such a kind heart.
Thank you.
I've known you as a citizen, and as a city employee, I've always appreciated your generous attitude towards the citizenry. I think this is good to try to educate a smaller group of people, but there's a broader conversation that I think needs to be had in our community about what place the citizens, what role they do have in our government. And if I had to say, one of the things that I've experienced a little frustration with this year is that I think citizens think the elected officials are going to do all the work for issues that are in their backyard. And I know for myself as a citizen these last 11 years, any issues that I had an impact in, I had to take that up myself. A council member didn't come forth and do that for me. So I'm constantly trying to educate and do what you're going to be doing with this group of people to tell these citizens when a situation arises, you need to step up, you need to see what you can do to make a difference, to contact us. And I think part of that challenge is that a lot of citizens don't know how to do that. They don't know how government works. They don't know about how these meetings work, how the process works with an ordinance that's going to be created. They might think you just snap your fingers and then all of a sudden an ordinance is put into place, and it doesn't work that way at all. So I'm glad that you're doing this. I will continue to educate people, as I know the rest of us do as well, when we have situational things like Councilor Neitzer said, like maybe the annexation thing or an apartment building in your backyard or whatever, chickens or whatever it might be.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Russ, thank you for the presentation. Another educational program, and obviously I'm going to be a big proponent of education and awareness programs, because they have, even though I've found in our business of traffic safety awareness programs, it's difficult to measure their effectiveness, and that's always the challenge. But I'm convinced that it has a very positive impact on the enforcement that is required then as a result of being out and educating and making the public aware. And this is just another example of a great effort, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll do our best, as you know.
I'm sure you will. Okay, that's our final item on the agenda here, and just a reminder that we'll be starting in 15 minutes our public services. There's been a request for 15-minute break, so it'll be about 28 minutes after the hour when public services will convene. So this meeting is adjourned.